Good evening, everyone. Please take your seat. Diana, you want to come up? Good evening, everybody, and thank you, New Yorkers, for braving the call tonight. I'm Gadi Levy. I'm the Executive Director of the Temple Emmanuel Stryker Centers, and it is my honor to welcome you here and online for a conversation with one of the most closely watched political leaders in America today. Governor Gavin Newsom, as his new autobiography, Young Men in a Hurry, suggests, rose quickly while others urged him to slow down. Slow isn't his style. Elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors before turning 30, mayor before 40, governor before 50. He has challenged his own party and opposition alike, issuing marriage license to same-sex couples despite state law, advancing sweeping climate and gun safety measures, fighting homelessness, and supporting limits on transgender athlete participation in women's sports. Gavin Newsom's chart is on course. He joins us tonight with political commentary, Harry Sisson, whose Gen Z-focused platform reaches more than 2 million followers. Please welcome our moderator for tonight, Harry Sisson.
Oh, man. Well, look, if you're applauding for me like that, wait till you see the next guy. He's pretty cool. It's going to be fun. That was a lovely introduction. Made me sound way cooler than I actually am. I can guarantee you that much. It'd be nice to be introduced like that everywhere. You know, like a restaurant. They say, oh, here is Barack Obama's right-hand man, Joe Biden's senior advisor, Gavin Newsom's VP pick for 2028. I mean, I'm spitballing. I just, see what sticks. But I just wanted to briefly introduce myself before we get the conversation going. My name is Harry Sisson, 23 years old. I've been posting political videos for almost 6 years. In April 4th, I believe, it's going to be 6 years. Oh, please. You guys are too kind. And it's been a wild ride. I've been attacked by Donald Trump. I've been attacked by Republican members of Congress. And I've also been attacked by Fox News, who I've been asking, are they here tonight? I'm hoping they were. But of course, they're covering more important stories, right? They're talking about what shoes Joe Biden is wearing, or the color of Obama's suit, or the way that Gavin Newsom sits. By the way, these are all real stories they've actually covered on air. And they have a long night ahead of themselves kissing ass after Donald Trump's State of the Union. Oh, man, but I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have tonight. We're talking about his new book, Young Man in a Hurry. The good thing about this book is you can actually read it. Unlike the Epstein files, there are no redactions in here. None of that. There's no covering up alleged crimes. It's great. It's a really good book. And I'm not just saying that because I'm up here. I really, really enjoyed it. So if you get the opportunity, you should absolutely read it. But I'm really excited to have this conversation. And last thing I'll say before we bring out the governor is conversations like this really keep me sane. They keep me hopeful. I think it's really easy to become depressed and cynical and pessimistic about everything going on. I mean, you wake up every day, you look at your phone, you see a headline that says, Donald Trump kicks puppy down the stairs, and you're like, well, yeah, that tracks, and then there's a story 6 hours later, and then another one. It's overwhelming, it's heavy. But hearing from people like Governor Newsom, people who care, people who are in their positions trying to do good things for the people they represent, it's nice. It keeps me sane. And you can look at the people beside you tonight. They're on the right side of history. They're doing the right thing. So it is a reminder there are good people out there. And it's always nice, But listen, you didn't pay to hear me yap. You didn't pay to hear me monologue. You're here because we want to hear from Governor Gavin Newsom. So please welcome to the stage America's Governor, Gavin Newsom. Come on.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right.
Vice President, huh?
Well, if you're offering.
Don't you have to be 35 to be Vice President?
Wait, we don't care about the law anymore, do we? Well, Governor, this is your fourth book stop in 4 days, is that right?
Yeah, but this is the one that matters because this is the day that the book is available to purchase. So
there you go.
guys.
It's
Good to be with everybody.
Go buy it. We're not going to spoil it. But The first question I want to ask, and I'm going to whip out my phone because my questions are on my phone. Very Gen Z. But first question,
You actually read this thing, right?
I read it front to back.
Unbelievable.
It was really, really good. Again,
By the
I'm
way,
not just
has
saying that.
anyone read the book? Just out of curiosity. That's probably...
Nobody?
Not many hands went up. It's probably why you're here. Because this is a different kind of book, right, Harry?
Right, that's exactly, and I wanted to ask you about that. I was talking to your team in preparation for this, and I was reading the book, and a lot of work went into it. I mean, this was a 4-year project. You listened to these interviews that your father did that you didn't know existed. You spoke to family, friends about your mother, your father, just your general background. And in the first chapter, you go very in-depth on your history. So I'm curious, like, what was the process like? What did you enjoy? What did you not enjoy?
Well, my mom passed away about 20 years ago, so she wasn't around to help me with this memoir. My father survived just long enough to see me get elected governor, and it was a miracle that he lasted that long. And so this book goes up until his death, which went around the transition to my inaugural as governor, which unfortunately he wasn't able to be at. And so it was a reflective book. It was a memoir that fundamentally was about discovery. It's Young Man in a Hurry, but a memoir of discovery. Discovering more about him, discovering about my mom, learning about why they got divorced. They never told me. Mom was 19, pregnant with me. A few years later, she's raising 2 kids on her own. I found out, didn't know this, in that oral history that you represent. Someone casually mentioned, did you ever hear that Bancroft Library interview your dad did? I said, what are you talking about? And in the interview, he describes having run for local office on the County Board of Supervisors and lost, and then immediately turned around and ran in 1968 for state senate and lost. And he said he was broke and broken and had a panic attack and basically took off and left. Left my mom, kid, to raise 2 kids on her own. I never understood why they got divorced, nor in that process of discovery, never understood why my mom was so insistent that I not get into politics. And that's been this book, and it's why it was over a multi-year period. This is not one of those political books that I wrote just to, try to get it ahead of some cycle or, in the calendar year. Legitimately. In fact, if you think I'm overstating it, this was supposed to have happened this time last year, but the fires in Los Angeles delayed it. And so that gave me even more time to dive even deeper and to try to paint a picture that's a little richer than the one that you may necessarily see, or you might see on nightly news, particularly in Fox. It's not a politician's book. It's not about the politician. It's about what shaped me, the events, the travails, the setbacks, self-imposed otherwise, the insecurities, the anxieties, the regrets, And it ultimately is a love letter to my mom and my dad. And that became the most precious part of this. All that grit and resilience, that hard work single moms go through every single day, working 2-3 jobs, and being with her when she took her last breath, which was the hardest part to write in this book.
Well, on that point, I mean, when I was reading this book in preparation, I've read a lot of politicians' books. This is nothing like that. This is not a book you'd see from a politician who may or may not be running for president, but it's up in the air. We don't know. But it's not a book you'd normally hear from a politician. It's real, it's authentic, it's intimate. So why go that angle? Why not just put out the politician book?
Because I'm on the other side now. I think it's reflected in my social media. It's reflected in, just trying to show up and meet this moment. And, I talk about, I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, the first duty in life is that we all strike a pose. And the second duty, no one's really figured out. And I'm in that second phase of my life. I struck a pose. I put a mask on, and at times my face grew into it, becoming someone I couldn't even recognize. My mother and dad didn't even recognize. Some of my friends, family didn't recognize. And I try to understand that. What was that about? Who was I becoming? In this process, when I say discovery, I literally have learned more about myself. And I'm just now on the other side. Honestly, I do this, it's just deep breath. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, my mom said it was okay to be average. I hated her for that. But I now understand why she told me that. She was struggling with a kid who was struggling to read and write, with an adult who still doesn't read speeches. You've never seen me read a speech because I can't. And I'm not trying to, it's not, some story of sorrow, just a fact. But the fact was I never thanked my mother or even understood the struggle she went through raising a kid that was struggling. It was always through the lens and prism of me. Come on, Mom. Not appreciating all that she had gone through. Not appreciating what she went through when she grew up. I describe in this book, there's a scene where her father, when she was a young daughter, there was a roaring fire and took the twins, my mom and her sister, and threw them against the fireplace and put a gun to their head. I didn't know about this. I didn't know how that shaped her. I just knew that my grandfather committed suicide. I vaguely knew about his time as a prisoner of war. He marched in Corregidor. Talk a lot about the Bataan Death March, but not Corregidor. And he came back broken, drinking, violent at times. I didn't know how that shaped her and how it shaped me. And so this book is about all of that. And I discovered not just, about my relationship to my mom, but also discovered the relationship I want with my kids, the relationship I want with my wife, and how I was walking down a path that was very similar to my father's. And now the ability to reconcile that and to be more present is all part of this, that it's okay. You are who you are. It's messy. Life's messy. We make mistakes. And so this is not a sanitized work. This is me scrutinizing myself and diving deeper and trying to really understand the why. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? What's the real motivation? Is it ego? Did I try to be something? What is this about my resume values or is it about my eulogy values? What and who am I becoming? So it was even, I said this, if no one else bought it, it was a gift for me, and it's a gift that I wanted to give my 4 kids.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I actually have a question about the title. It's Young Man in a Hurry, and you talk about your early life, the desire you felt to keep going and do more. And I'm curious, can you define that hurry? What was that hurry? What motivated that hurry? And do you still feel that today?
Yeah, if your mom says it's okay to be average, that may create a chip on your shoulder. If you're sitting in the back of the classroom with your head down and, Mr. Morris's class, and they ask you to read a chapter and everybody starts laughing at you, then you may have a little chip on your shoulder. And you try to make up for that, back to that mask you put on. I put on a suit in high school. Talk about a mask. I talk about something, it's, you roll your eyes, but, sort of this metamorphosis of sorts, talk about a mask, is when I found Dippity-Doo hair gel. My sophomore to junior year, because I fell in love with this character on Remington Steele when Pierce Brosnan was a detective, and I just wanted to be like him. And so that's why I came to school in a suit. There's a scene in here with my sister saying, "Oh, why do you have to be such a dork?" She said, "You're embarrassing me," and she tried to buy me a pair of jeans. But that's the curse and the blessing of life. Back to the pose. And so that's, a little bit. That young man was always in a hurry. And it really came in a profound and deep way for me. I talk about being there with my mom for her last breath. I got a phone call. You talk about a pattern interrupt. a voice message. And it was from my mom saying, hello. Next Thursday will be my last day. And if you're interested, you may want to drop by before then. I literally have that voicemail to this day. Kept it on a little tape recorder. And what do you do in that circumstance? I immediately called my sister, what is going on? And she was stunned I didn't know. Because that young man in a hurry was only focused on himself. I was hustling, running my restaurant, a few little small businesses. I was a county supervisor, and it was just me. And I didn't realize how sick she'd been with breast cancer. I'd come back. She had survived one round of it, and I just frankly took it for granted that she'll be okay the second time. And she said that next Thursday she did an assisted suicide back when it was illegal in California. Interestingly, I signed the bill to make it legal because of that experience. And I say this, and I deeply do respect people that feel very differently. But we had a courageous doctor that was willing to lose his license. And I'll never forget those last few days being with my mom, trying to cook whatever she can eat, watching, an Antique Roadshow, NPR, PBS with her every night, and being there and the pain she was in. And the pain then that was expressed by being with her for that last few hours. My sister and I walking in after the rest of the family came in to say goodbyes. Everybody's in the living room, and she wanted her 2 kids to be with her. And the doctor had just left, and she's beginning to sort of come in and out, looking through old photos. My sister on the left, I'm on the right, both holding her hand. And my sister, who's just extraordinary, she just said, I can't take it. She just ran out. And I was left my own. I thought I couldn't leave her behind. She's still breathing. And I was there as she took these violent last breaths. There was nothing. This was not one of those beautiful movies where the credits come up. And I sat there for almost 20 minutes, just holding her hand with my head on her chest. And saying all the things that I didn't even have the guts to say 20 minutes before. And I used to, and this is again, that's why I hope everyone writes their own story. I used to resent her for that. Why did she make me do that? Because I struggled with that, just the horror of that. And now I think about it, Harry, and I don't know if maybe it's my time of life, maybe it's my state of mind. I now think about it, I'm still holding her hand. Her breaths are my breath. And how blessed I am that she was there for me and gave me that gift of being there at the end of her life, and how I can breathe new life into my relationships with my kids and those I love. So that's what this book's about. If you came here for 10-point plan for America's renewal, those are the easy ones to write. This one, a little bit more challenging.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask this question later, but since we're on the topic, I mean, the part of the book where you're describing your mother's passing is truly heartbreaking. I had to put the book down. I was like, this is heavy. And you are somebody who has been personally touched by cancer, as there are so many Americans out there. And you turn around, you're a governor of a state, you turn around, you see Donald Trump and RFK Jr. and all these guys, and they're cutting cancer research, they're cutting pediatric cancer research. We have mRNA vaccines right now, the same ones you use for COVID, that are being developed to target pancreatic cancer, liver cancer, lung cancer. It's a remarkable development in science. And yet RFK Jr. cut $500 million in funding for that research. And so I'm wondering, as someone who's been personally touched by cancer, how do you make sense of that? What's your reaction?
You crawl out of your skin.
Yeah.
But you also realize you have agency, you can shape the future. And I think this goes to,
I like that.
The broader, sort of pulling in a thread. We're not bystanders in this world. Future is not just something to experience, it's something to manifest. It's decisions, not conditions, that determine our fate and future. And it's the approach we're trying to take to a myriad of issues, not just on health, but across the spectrum. And it goes, frankly, to some of my frustration as well, and I say this with love, with my party. Sometimes we sit back, we're on our heels, we're not leaning in. We're being shape-shifted, not shape-shifting. I had the privilege as governor, not just to complain about what they're doing at HHS and CDC, I had the ability to come up with a West Coast offense. Reached out to the governors of Oregon and Washington and the governor of Hawaii, and we created our own CDC. We hired the former director of the CDC. We're putting out our own guidelines. We're championing science. We're stepping up. We did the same thing. We created a Reproductive Freedom Alliance after Dobbs, 24 governors coming together, sharing best practices in real time to try to organize around these things. Not, as Nancy would say, agonize, but organize, building partnerships, building capacity, developing a muscle to push back, to lean in, to meet this moment head on. And so that's the approach we're trying to take in every respect. And we're also now calling out those that I think are a little complicit in this moment. Those that are a little timid in this moment. My talk about social media lens that I've put up to Trump and the Trump administration. And, some of my friends on Fox said, that my mother should, be ashamed and wash my mouth out with soap because of some of the tweets I've put out. That mirror Donald Trump's tweets, where they didn't say one word. Not one word was ever spoken about Donald Trump dressing up as a pope. Not one word was ever spoken about Donald Trump dressing up as Superman or putting his face on Mount Rushmore in all caps. They didn't say a word about any of that. How dare we put a lens and a mirror up to not only Trump, but those that are enabling Trump, the folks on the propaganda networks that every single day are countenancing that. And so it's an approach, it's a mindset, and it's one, yes, shaped by the grit of a single mom working 3 jobs who never complained, never explained, that lived in the living room for most of the homes. I described each one of those houses with the addresses where we were renting out her bedroom so she can help pay the rent. We were a foster family growing up, where she was coming home, and the reason she worked at Ramona's restaurant was because she got a bunch of food she can bring home to the kids. I don't want to overstate that relationship to the economic reality, Mike, but I'm not going to understate it because she deserves the truth. And it's hard, the truth, because the caricature is so much in politics. You get defined, and I talk about this in the book, how I played into the stereotype of me. Back to the suits and the shoes, the hair, the whole thing. And the relationship I had with a father that was proximate to privilege. Didn't die with any money, died with books, a second mortgage in a beautiful town in the gold rush country of Dutch Flat. But relationships with a very wealthy family that have also defined a tremendous amount of my life and defined the privileges that I've enjoyed along the way. And this book is also about that, I wouldn't suggest it's a dialectic, but that duality. At times that contradictions of walking in both worlds, but always walking back home to a mom that had a different sensibility and a reaction to my father's world. And I think it's very much the world we're living in today. Haves and have-nots. My mom, she couldn't even live on 104 paychecks, let alone 52. That's why she was doing that extra part-time work. And that's the reality for more and more millions of people today. And so that's also part of what I wanted to express, that journey I've been on and that experience and that perspective that shaped so much of my belief system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've talked about this a little bit, but I'd love to dive in a little bit more about the different relationship you have with your mother versus your father. Your mother, she was holding 3 jobs at one point. Your father left early. She was holding it down. She was taking care of you and your sister. And she was the one that when you struck out at Little League, which you should tell, that's a great story as well. She was the one that took you out to the baseball field and threw you pitches until you got it right.
Well, really, I didn't. So I was, anyone that as a kid who plays baseball or played baseball themselves, I was a right fielder in Little League. Some of you know that. So, unsurprisingly, in the ninth batter, the third inning, I'd come up for the first time. Strike one, strike two, strike three. Next time up, ball one. Strike one, two, three. Third time, just didn't even try. So I remember striking out 3 times. I think it was Maurice Bigden who was pitching. I played for the great Round Table Pizza, my local Little League, Joe Wagner Field. And I came back demoralized. My mom made the end of the game, and I was just crushed. And we were nearby Joe Wagner. And so I got home, and I'm quitting. This is the worst thing. Why are you making me do this? This is the worst thing. And she got a bucket of balls. And this was after everyone left, and went right back out on the field. And she was a really great athlete. And I describe her athleticism. And she threw the balls with me for about an hour. And I never understood what that meant until the day I got a partial baseball scholarship to get into college. And that's how I got into college. That's the reason I got into 4-year college. But it was that example. It's that's my mom. That's moms. That's all of you that love their kids. And what was a lesson that night? That was a lesson in persistence and not giving up. It wasn't a baseball lesson. And what a gift. Those are magical moments you look back in your life. Those are the moments that shape you. You don't even realize your mind is being stretched. And it's never going to go back to its original form. And so that story is a special one for me. And it has so many meanings because baseball became so special to me. My father, again, my father was there, but in the distance. He really came back in my high school years when, all of a sudden he could bring his buddies, and I'm the captain of the basketball team and the captain of the baseball team. And then I got interested in politics, and then our relationship began to thrive.
Well, I also want to talk about another experience you had early on in your life, which was you talked about getting bullied. And the kids picking on you, the main one you called, and I want to quote this correctly, the bully of Baltimore Avenue.
I remember him. I will find him if he's here. Present yourself, sir.
Well, this bully, interestingly enough, and I was interested to learn this, called you Newscum.
Can't make it up.
True story. Heard that before?
Let me cut you off.
Go ahead.
So last June, you may recall, 4,000 National Guard were federalized in the state of California. 700 active duty Marines were not sent overseas. They were sent to the second largest city in the United States of America, the full militarization of an American city, a war on American people. That happened in California first last June. And that happened through a conversation I had with Donald Trump the night before he announced on Truth Social that he was federalizing the Guard. I'll never forget the conversation. It was 17 minutes, and the reason I never forgot it is there's oversight hearings, and I'm likely to go in front of Congress to discuss it. So I wrote it out in detail. Here's how the conversation went. It's 11 o'clock, 10:30 or so my time, and I'm getting all these calls from someplace in Palm Beach. And I said it couldn't be, but I had Susie Wiles text. I said, could it be? She said it is. And I said, well, I'll call tomorrow. It's so late. She goes, you should call now. Call the president, gets on, he goes, hey, Gavin. So I'm expecting, here's the riot act. Hey, what do you think of Newscum? He goes, that's pretty original, huh? What do you think of it? It's pretty original. And I'm like, he goes, yeah, it's pretty good nickname, right? I said, well, no. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, literally, I just finished writing. I said, no, I was called that by an 8th grader, not an 80-year-old when I was a kid. Literally, true story. And I talk about that kid right here. And then, but I won't get too much into it, but you'll probably see it on C-SPAN in a few months. But the next one, he goes, well, what do you think of MAGA? I'm like, are you seriously? I literally said, are we seriously having this conversation? He goes, that's pretty good, right? I said, but that's not, I even said, that's not original either. I said, Reagan, and he cut me off. He goes, how many hats do you think I sold last month? I said, how many hats? He said, like 200,000. I said, well, that's pretty impressive. That was the conversation, 17 minutes of that. And then the next day, we said at the time, the future happens often in California. First, that was America's coming attraction. Little did we know what was going to happen in Washington, D.C., what was going to happen in Chicago, what was going to happen in Minnesota and cities and counties all across the United States, large and small. By the way, we said the same thing when we fought back, fighting fire with fire and not standing back as it relates to Proposition 50 in California. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And by the way, on that, there's a lesson there, and forgive me, I don't want to digress too much, but that was amazing, wasn't it? That not the response, but that the President of the United States would call a sitting governor by the name of Greg Abbott and said he's, quote unquote, entitled to 5 seats. Entitled to 5 seats. Governor Abbott, find them for me. They're mine. I remember tweeting something out myself, just putting something out saying, well, we're watching what's going on, not realizing what ultimately we would do. I am convinced, had we not had the experience in June, I probably would have just gone forward and write an op-ed and prayed that the New York Times would carry it, try to win an argument. You know, so often, respectfully, that's what Democrats do. We just think the facts are going to bear out. We can win the argument. We can moralize this. Isn't it so sad? Yeah, it's terrible. That's not going to work anymore with Donald Trump. We have to fight fire with fire. We've got to punch back. And that's exactly what we did. And people are doing all across the country. You're doing it. The people of Minneapolis have done it. Otherwise, we'll lose the republic. It's the 250th anniversary, the best of the road. I mean, this is the 250th anniversary.
Yeah.
The Founding Fathers didn't live and die for this. Their historic project was about the best of the Roman Republic, best of Greek democracy, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, the rule of law, not the rule of Don. And I hope it's dawning on everybody what we're up against. I thought it was really interesting. You may, I imagine 9 out of 10 of you saw Donald Trump flailing in a way that even by his own standards was unique last Friday after the Supreme Court, because it may have even dawned on him that despite his assertion as an imperial president, there may still be a heartbeat, at least with one branch of government. But the real story I think about, going too far down this rabbit hole, of that loss and his response to it, wasn't a policy-making concern that he had around tariffs. It was a profit-making concern he had around tariffs. Those tariffs are about his personal portfolio. I mean, what is the one thing every single foreign trip with Donald Trump has in common? He sends his envoys. Now, Wickoff eventually gets there. He's part of it. But he sends the boys, sends the business partners to meet with the UAE first, to do the deal to make sure the Wickoff and the Trump family have the $2 billion in world financial liberty. Establish that first, then we can discuss the high-value computer chips that we can approve in return. Your national security for their personal portfolio. Let's talk about what happened in Vietnam and the tariffs. They magically dropped 26%. But first, the government in Vietnam had to approve the $1.5 billion golf course and fast-track the environmental work. All of these deals have a grift in common. Not about free enterprise anymore. It's crony capitalism. It's state capitalism. It's about the golden shares. And if you don't share, 10% of Intel, 25% AMD, NVIDIA, MP Materials. Look across the spectrum on all of these things. The Trump tenure, Trump story is a story of corruption, of grift, the likes of which we've never experienced in modern American history. And that's why we can't write op-eds anymore. I mean, you saw this on January 6th. You know, a broken man tried to break this country, tried to light democracy on fire. Democracy is for suckers. You know, Harry, you mentioned I've been on the road. I was down there literally 48 hours ago in Fulton County. Dialed up, not the version of Greg Abbott, but the original version to try to find 11,000, 12,000 seats. Now what he's doing, he's literally trying to take over. He will take over. They are convinced he's going to take over the election down there. He is not screwing around. He talked about nationalizing the election. 2 days later, he said, no, really just in 15 states. Which ones? All blue. Look what he did the day we kicked off the Prop 50 campaign. We said it was a preview of things to come, 4,000 National Guard coming across the rest of the country. The day we kicked off the campaign in Little Tokyo at the Democracy Center, that's the sacred site. For any of you who have been in LA, you may know this site as a sacred site where we were interning the Japanese. That was the depot where the buses went. And that was the day we had about 500 people in the room, 20 U.S. representatives, the House, and 2 senators, faith leaders, community leaders to kick it off, and dozens of masked men right outside the front door. And a gentleman dressed up as if he came off a movie set from the 1930s by the name of Bovino. That was the preview of things to come. We said that the next day. We've seen that play out all across the state. Interesting. On election day, let's not forget this. On election day in California, this is weeks ago, Donald Trump sends out a Truth Social before anyone votes saying the election was rigged. He sent out election monitors from the Department of Justice to oversee the election. But you know what else he did? He sent out BORTAC teams. These are the Border Patrol tactical units, the guys with the Apache helicopters. And he sent them to Dodger Stadium so that the morning news would plaster that wall to wall. Communities already on edge, now scared to death to go to the polls. He is not screwing around. That is a preview of things to come. Across the spectrum, we will lose this country unless we recognize what we're up against. He does not believe in fair and free elections. He is committed to vandalizing this election for the same reason he was committed to getting those 5 seats, because he knows he's going to get shellacked, he's going to get crushed in this midterms, and he's going to lose that gavel. So we must remain vigilant. And I think, look, Harry, back to this book.
I thought that was great. I loved it. I like that. Come on.
I discovered, I didn't know where, I've been out front on a few issues and appreciate the original introduction, marriage equality, a little before my party was pleased that I was out front on that. And I always wondered where that gene came from. And back to this memoir of discovery, I started learning about my great-grandmother as a suffragette. Someone told me, they said, the Oppenheimer book, they said, I think your grandfather's. I said, no, he's not. I never read the Oppenheimer. It was this big. I'm like, I'm dyslexic. No, thank you. And then my cousin comes to me, and he goes, I hear you're writing the book. I've got these FBI files, and it's all about Grandpa and Oppenheimer and how they were casing his business, how he ultimately left his practice in the lab, how he was under surveillance by the FBI, all of these things. And this activism that I didn't know was shaped on my mother's side, not just from my father's prism as an activist judge on the California Court of Appeal. And so I'm so blessed by that. Back to this thing, echo, life echoes. We are, I am because you are. This, larger notion of who we are. This sort of this shapes, and it should shape all of us. This sort of notion that we're all this sort of individual hero in our own life. Not the case. And Harry, I never understood that. That young man in a hurry never understood that. I was reading self-help books. I was listening to Tony Robbins. I thought it was just about that mindset. It wasn't about the stage set that is our lives, and those relationships to the truth and the lies and the past and the present.
Well, on the contrast of everything you just said with Donald Trump is doing, and I was saying this to the crowd before you came out, this is a reminder that there are good people out there. And I would characterize you as a good person. And I want to talk about my favorite quote from the book.
Uh-oh.
No, it's a good one. And you can fill in the gaps if I miss anything. But in the early 2000s, you were invited to the State of the Union. I think you know where I'm going with this. You were invited to the State of the Union, and it was George Bush. And it was
22 years ago tonight.
Oh, wow, that's right. It was George Bush, and the speech you described it as like, kind of a normal speech you'd expect from a Republican president, but he said something that in particular caught your eye. And he was talking about...
I feel like I miss old George. The good old days. Sorry, continue, Harry.
No. He talked about protecting marriage. Yeah. I believe it was the Defense for Marriage Act.
Yeah.
Defense of Marriage Act. And
called for a constitutional amendment then.
Exactly. And you heard people next to you admonishing gay couples. Yeah. And as soon as you walked out of that speech, you call your advisors back in San Francisco, you said, they're coming after, and this is when you're mayor, they're coming after my people. They're coming after people I represent. We have to do something about this. Yeah. And so you put into motion this plan to start issuing same-sex marriage licenses in San Francisco. And this is not something that's popular at the time. They had like a 30% approval rating in San Francisco. President Obama didn't want to be photographed with you during this. And
he made up for that.
He's been incredible.
He's great.
Yeah, he made up
really,
for it, more
including
than
on that subject, to his
exactly.
credit.
But before you put it into place, you were sat down by family and friends. It was like an intimate dinner. And the quote is...
read this. I'm impressed.
Of course. The quote is, "Why are you doing this, Gavin?"
Yeah.
And you said, "I'll tell you why I'm doing this, because it's the right thing to do."
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, look, because I had no better argument. It's a scene with my father, old Irish Catholic, grew up in the church, but he went to church every single day. He had 5 brothers and sisters every single day, and that shaped his life, and it really shaped my first race for mayor. The church was deeply involved. The archbishop, who I didn't even know was supporting me, said the worst mistake he ever made after this was supporting me. And I was like, I didn't know you could campaign for someone. And so it was hard. And then when it was Nancy Pelosi. She had asked, I just became mayor. It was just a few weeks into my getting elected. She asked that everyone would be assembled around the State of the Union, and they would do a little reception and meet the California congressional delegation. By the way, that night, true story, oh God, I didn't realize it at the time. I'll never, forever, ever forget. I had, that was the first time I met John Lewis. And so Nancy had the reception. I'm leaving. And she goes, well, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm just going to go hotel. I'm leaving first thing in the morning. She goes, well, why don't you stay and go watch the State of the Union? I said, how am I doing? I said, well, Paul doesn't want to go, her husband, and you'll have a ticket. So I went up and listened to the speech. And I remember the whole speech intimately for another reason. Senator Kennedy was there and still alive. And I didn't know when to stand and when not to stand. And I was awkwardly standing, realized, wait, I shouldn't be standing. And then I just stared at Kennedy and took his cue in the back. I was like, so I didn't stand much at all in that speech. But when the speech was done, we had to get our cell phones, and we're in line. And there was a couple right behind me, and this is, Harry, what you're referring to. And the couple was saying, boy, how proud they were of the president. They said, what a magnificent speech this was. And I'll never forget, I'm just standing in front of them, and they went, and I remember these words. They said, we're just so sick and tired of the homosexual agenda. And I remember literally looking like this, instinctively wanting to introduce myself as mayor of San Francisco. Didn't do that, but literally in that moment, shape shifted. Got the phone, was going to go back to Nancy's office, and decided instead to go the opposite direction and walked outside the Capitol down a hall. The reason I remember I went the wrong way is because I never got back in. It was locked behind me. It was a cold night. And I made a phone call to my chief of staff saying we need to do something about it. And I'll be honest with you, it may have been just an op-ed. Came back home, And my staff was very worried about this. And my father was like, come on, you just got elected. You know, you don't need to do this. You never promised to do this, and you can't legally do this. And I said, well, we can challenge the unconstitutionality of this. And I said, we have a couple that actually wants to do that, and we'll just have one marriage, put a human face on this, Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. They've been together 49 years. Then the manifestation of faith, love, devotion, constantly, what marriage should be all about. And they agreed to do it. And you won't believe this, but we didn't want to make it political. And so the clerk, our county clerk, opened up, and she did it. I stayed in my office as to not make anything. The problem was the next day we were going to do it, we had all kinds of word, and governor was upset about it, Republican governor at the time in California. Bush heard about it, and they were coming into the federal courts, which were right across the street from City Hall, to shut us down to get a TRO. And we were kind of in a panic overnight. And then I realized, wait a second, I'm mayor. Mayor de Blasio, you understand this. And I realized, wait a second, I can open up City Hall before 9 o'clock, before the federal courts open, and we can sneak this marriage ceremony in, and that's exactly what we did. And we got it done. But at 9:30, when the decision came out and said there was no irreparable harm, there were a few other couples that were friends of Phyllis and Del, and we're like, well, we've been together 30 years. And we were forced with a decision. 4,035 other couples later from 46 states and 6 countries over a 1-month period in the winter, not summer, of love in San Francisco. And that was a remarkable moment. But here's what was most remarkable about it. There was no love from the Democratic Party. And I write about that. And I discovered, I must not have read, the way I got through all that was not reading a lot about what people were saying about me. You know, all the pundits saying he's toxic, he's the laughingstock of the Democratic Party. They tried everything they could to make sure, do you really have to go to Boston for the convention? You know it's cold in Boston. You really are new mayor, you should stick back home, anything could happen. You don't want to turn your back. They tried everything. And it was a little lonely because these are the same exact people that told me it's always the right time to do the right thing. But the real decision was made at the Balboa Cafe, the seniors saying, with my dad and his best friend, Joe Cachet, who's a fierce advocate and lawyer. And they really tried to talk me down the night before, saying, don't do this. And Joe hit me 10 times with trying to say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? I said, Joe, because it's the right thing to do. And I'll never forget, Joe looks at my dad, he says, Bill, it's the right thing to do. And we're going to do this together. And that's how it happened.
Wow. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. It gives me hope, I
don't know. And Harry, the thing about that, too, it was the beginner's mind. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was 36 years old. Didn't know what I didn't know. And I think there's something to that, too. I think, part of wisdom is, forgetting what you think you already know. And that was also shaped in this book as I dug deeper. And I'm constantly challenging my assumptions. One of the great gifts of dyslexia is you get really good at failing forward and fast. You learn resiliency, you learn grit. I think my mom said, if you fail, congratulations, because most folks don't even try. And so the willingness to take risks, and it's marked a lot of my history. It marks what we're doing on social media. I get it. That's not normal what I'm putting out. Did you read what I put out on the State of the Union tonight? That's not normal.
Well, I liked the other day how you said
don't. In fact, don't. You may be the first ones to leave. But again, so it just goes to where I am in my life, where I am in the book, where I am in terms of my politics. Just let it go. Just be who you are. And that's, I keep talking about that mask. I'm trying to take it off every single day. And so, as I say, I'm thank you all for being here. I'm really humbled by it. It's an extraordinary turnout, and you know, I hope you know, most of you will scan the book, but I hope you'll find a chapter or two in there. I hope you'll find some meaning, some message that connects to your story, your life, and your journey. And if you're not interested in that, I am sure you'll be interested in the chapter on Donald Trump.
I actually have a question about that. I want to ask about now my least favorite quote from the book, and it's not from you. So this is a bad one, folks. I'm not going to lie. You had met with Donald Trump as governor-elect in 2018 to explore the fires in California, and he was a weird guy, to put it mildly. He was trying to impress you, kind of be chummy with you, and be friendly with you, and then, he leaves and you're inaugurated. But during your inaugural speech, a line in particular caught his attention, which was, quote, "We will offer an alternative to the corruption and incompetence in the White House." And Donald Trump calls you up, and you describe him as wounded. He felt a little hurt because he thought you were friends.
Yeah.
But one line in particular, really, it was gross. So he was talking about the visuals of your speech and how he didn't like it. He had to explain it to Melania, but he also said,
it's all in the book.
I wonder how many copies Melania bought of the book.
Oh.
Sorry. Donald Trump said to you, "Hey, Gavin, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but that wife of yours is pretty hot.
Yeah.
And the kid's beautiful family."
Anyone here surprised by Trump? You know, it was interesting. He called me first thing in the morning. But can I paint a little different picture of that speech? I dedicate this book. I'll say it again. This book is for Dutchie, for Montana, Hunter, and Brooklyn. I say, may you continue the story. That's the dedication. But my dedication to them comes from my dedication to be a better father, at least early than my dad was, and to support my wife, and to be a stronger partner. And boy, was that on full display in my inaugural. I said I don't read speeches because I don't, but if I have to, the exception is a teleprompter. And it's 850 hours for every 14 minutes or so. It's no exaggeration. If you see me read a 10-minute speech on a teleprompter, I assure you I've spent 30 hours. It's something ridiculous. And I'm very fixed on it. I don't want to lose the spacing in the words. So here I am in my inaugural. And I have a teleprompter. And the speech is going fine. Yeah, as speeches go. And my little guy is sitting in the front row. He's 2.5, Dutch, with his little pacifier and his little blanket. And he literally just sprints from the front and starts running up on stage. My wife tries to grab him, panics because everyone's looking, and he zigs up on stage and then runs over to me. I'm acting like no one, everybody's looking around. I'm looking at the teleprompter. I'm in full panic. This could go badly really quickly. I can never go back on script. And he comes right up to me and he grabs my leg. And he's just sitting there. And it's the instinct we all have as dad, right? You just go down and you lift him up. And what he did next, any parent, you'll understand this. He put his head right in my lap and started to fall asleep. You can look at this up. And I didn't know what to do, so I kept reading the speech. I have never given a better speech in my life. No one remembers a damn word I said. All of them say, I want you to do that speech again. And it had to do with one thing. It had to do with the most important thing. The thing that we all discover sometimes when it's too late. Talk about that, that David Brooks, resume values versus eulogy. That's the eulogy. That's the why. That's the essence of it. And for Trump, it was just the way that looked. It was about everything but not that. And it sums him up. In this chapter, he summed himself up also beautifully. so incurious. We had the worst wildfire in California's history then. Paradise, California, which he kept referring to as pleasure. This is when he told me to rake the forests. A few weeks later, I put out new hats that said, "Make America rake again." Throughout this entire time, all he cared about was how we all looked in the press conference. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I in detail, and I tried to paint as, honestly, a fair picture as I could of Trump. I didn't think I took, I agree. We get on Air Force One, and he immediately turns on Fox News. I'm surprised it wasn't on already. And he goes, "Hey, Gavin, we're looking pretty good there." Yeah, we're looking good. Just the look, the images, the whole thing. And then he takes me on a royal tour. Oh, boy. I should just do this as a cliffhanger and not share it. Where he's petting the side of the plane, where we go into his bedroom. I'll leave you wondering.
Gotta read it.
And we run around this, and we're on Marine One talking about Schwartzman. Schwartzman doesn't get this. He doesn't get this. It just summed him up. And it allowed me, it was the first time I engaged with him, to be able to ironically work with him and through COVID. And I was one of the few Democratic governors that actually had an interesting relationship with him through COVID, to understand him from that prism, through that lens of what motivates him and what doesn't. It's the reason I walked on the tarmac when he was in Los Angeles, basically uninvited. Kind of forced myself a little to get out there. And the reason I went to the Oval Office for 90 minutes, I think I was the first Democratic governor to do that. Luckily, I didn't let the cameras in. Otherwise, you all would have known about that. And so, for me, it's always about an open hand, not a closed fist. But I'll go back. I had that line, and he crossed it last June. And it's a line that keeps getting crossed. And forgive me, because I know our time's limited. I started a Patriot store. Like I said, I'm on the other side of things. It's a real Patriot store. And I sell, Bibles, and T-shirts, with Kid Rock and me, and Divine Light, the whole thing. And Newsom was right about everything. Hats. Newsom 2026 for my third term, and I also sell. Well, I did. I had knee pads that I was selling, but they had sold out. Just like our universities are selling out, just like our law firms are selling out, just like corporations are selling out, and media is selling out in this country, selling out this country. And it's happening in real time. Good people. I have new Trump Signature Series knee pads now. And by the way, I brought them with me in Switzerland. I don't think I'm going to be invited back. And handed them out. I mean, this is a serious moment. He wants Susan Rice fired from the board of Netflix. Just pause and think about that. This guy sent out a video of Obama, Michelle, and President Obama. Why was that a one-day story? The President of the United States and all of those enablers that were complicit, that never called that out on those propaganda networks. 24/7. So this is a moment, it's a moral moment, but it's a moment for all of us. And I think one of the things, that really shapes me about this, and one of the things my father taught me, he used to talk a lot about what Gandhi and Havel and Mandela and King all had in common, and he used to have a whole riff on it. And he said, "Son, you know what they had, all those four had in common." I'm like, well, one was a president. One, he said, no. At the peak of their influence, what did they have in common? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, jail time. And it's interesting. You think about Havel, the Velvet Revolution. You think about Mandela. Think about Gandhi. You think about King. I was with Ambassador Young 2 days ago in Atlanta talking about his daily visits to King. I didn't realize the depth of which Gandhi and the influence there brought that nonviolent movement into that movement. And it's really true. And I remind people all the time, as my mom and my dad reminded me, you don't have to be something to do something. You don't have to be something to do something. That what they all really had in common was the one thing that we all, if we're willing to exercise it, have in common. They had moral authority. They didn't need to have formal authority. Donald Trump has formal authority. He'll weaponize and use it tonight. He's weaponizing and using it every single day. He just sued UCLA for $1 billion extraction, an extortion fee today. He's taking out his opponent. I never thought I'd get a call from a governor saying he needed help. I said, I'm happy to send your campaign. He said, no, my legal defense fund, when Waltz called me because of the criminal prosecution that he's up against. This moment requires moral authority. Those that utilize their formal authority, more they use it, the less they have of it. The more we exercise our moral authority, the more abundant it becomes. And that's what you saw in Minnesota. Leadership, steel of citizens coming together, standing up. And so, Harry, I'm serious. I'm optimistic. Trump's in retreat. He is in retreat. This historic president, historically unpopular. His entire economic policy, which was built on a three-legged stool of massive tax breaks for the wealthy and well-to-do on the backs of small businesses and farmers and each and every one of us. Mass deportations and tariff, it's all collapsing in real time. 1.4% GDP growth in the last quarter. 49,000 jobs a month versus the 168,000 a month the prior year under the Biden administration, the worst jobs growth that we've seen since 2013. He's flailing in every single category, in retreat in Minnesota. And that's because of all of you. No kings, people showing up, not giving in to the cynicism, the fear, and the anxiety. And so I thanked you for being here for me tonight, but I imagine you're all here for each other as well, because you haven't gotten the memo. You know, you're that antidote. And so I'm blessed, and it's, what a gift. Bill gets this. You give a moment in time, and I don't want to dream of regretting. And this book is filled with a lot of regret. And I don't want to live like that anymore. And so I'm trying to put it all out there. And Harry, I appreciate you took the time to read it. I hope others will have that opportunity as well and share it. All the good, the bad, and the ugly. An imperfect life, but a person that's in the process of becoming. And we'll see where this journey ends. But Harry, I just want to thank you for being part of that journey and for being part of this conversation here tonight.
America's governor, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you for being out here.